Hello and welcome to Talk to the Paw, a podcast that celebrates dogs for simply being wagtastic. I'm Caroline Bartley, and in each dogcast I, along with canine nerd Scott Andrews, will bring you the latest pooch-related news and research, as well as discussing how and why these fabulous animals make such a huge contribution to our lives. Like a band embarking on that difficult second album, we're back for our slightly less tricky second podcast. Thank you to everyone who got in touch following the pilot episode. And remember, if you want to talk to the paw, you'll find us on Facebook and Twitter, Talk to the Paw Pod, that's using the number 2, or you can email us, info@talktothepaw.co.uk. Time to release the hounds and dive right into the first of our regular features. It's the Twilight Bark. So what news story has caught our eye? Well, we managed to get through one dogcast without mentioning the other C word, coronavirus, but we couldn't ignore it any longer. The Mirror revealed how animal experts are urging pet owners not to use masks or face coverings on their dogs. Social media is awash with snaps of people proudly showing their pets wearing such coverings, hoping it'll protect the animal against COVID-19. But vets are warning the practice causes huge stress and actually impairs canine breathing. Scott, pro-mask or anti-mask for your dog?
Sometimes I can't believe how much stupid there is in the world. Picture this, okay? You've got a German Shepherd, heart surgeon. There he is in the operating theatre. And he turns to his OR nurse and he says, "Nurse, pass me the scalpel." And the nurse leans over, sweat dripping from her brow, offers him the scalpel. Then he says, "Hold on a minute, I don't have opposable thumbs. There are some things that dogs can't do because of their anatomy, and one of them is wear a bloody mask." And you see these pictures, and the first thing that always gets me is dogs have ears on top of their head. We have ears on the side of their head. Do you know why?
I'm almost thinking there's a joke coming in here somewhere, but I can't quite think what it is. But I take your point, yes. Anatomically, the facial structure is very different. But you asked me a question, and I don't know the answer, so tell me the answer.
Dogs' ears rotate. For sound, they display emotion, it gives them better coverage of what's around them.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So you imagine if their ears were on the side of the head and they started rotating, half the time they'd be pointing straight up or straight down, which would be absolutely useless. Mm-hmm. You ask yourself, how on earth are these people securing the masks to the dog's face? Most masks are fabric and they have these almost like elastic cords that go around your ears.
Yeah, little elasticated bands at the side, yeah.
If there's no way to secure them on the back of the dog's head, they can only be tying them. This is where things get extremely troubling. First of all, the dog is feeling a mask being forced over its face.
From a canine's perspective, I would imagine that would be incredibly frightening.
Absolutely, because going back to Dr. German Shepherd, they don't have opposable thumbs, so removing the mask proves to be rather problematic. So you have this mask clamped to your face, often for a photo opportunity. You can't scratch it. If you scratch it, because it's secured on elasticated cords, it doesn't actually move. So it causes the dogs to start to panic. Much like us, the heart rate increases. And with that comes a rise in temperature, an increased level of stress. Do you remember last episode? We were talking about what dogs do to cool themselves down.
Is this a test of how good my memory is from the last episode? Dogs cool themselves down. They sweat through their paw pads and they also pant. So you'll see them with their mouths open, and obviously their rate of breathing is increasing, so they're panting.
Right, now you imagine you're stressed, you're feeling hot. The only way you can cool yourself down is breathing with an open mouth, and someone ties a mask to your face.
Okay, that's not going to work.
No, it's going to add to the stress and the panic. And generally, all you're serving to achieve is terrifying your dog in order to get an Instagram picture.
Yeah, I can imagine how strange that must feel, because out shopping the other day, Obviously, the wearing of face masks, coverings, compulsory now. And I must admit, for the first time since the pandemic started, I actually had, I guess, what I presume to be like a little panic attack. I don't know whether it's because the mask that I was wearing, it was off by a few degrees, but genuinely, I put this mask on and I felt like I couldn't breathe. And just for that brief instant, that 30 seconds, that minute, it was incredibly terrifying.
Could you have removed the mask?
Oh God, yes, absolutely, yeah.
So you have opposable thumbs?
Yes.
And
last time I looked, yeah.
And you have ears on the side of your head?
Some people describe them as elven ears, but yes, they are ears of sorts.
So you have all the ingredients, one, to ensure that the mask sits more comfortably, two, you're able to remove it. How would you feel if it was tightly wrapped around your head and you couldn't remove it?
I couldn't even begin to imagine the level of distress that might cause.
So I'm asking each and every one of you, I know it might be amusing for a picture, but your dog won't think so.
In general then, Scott, the medical advice, the veterinary advice, if you will, regarding coronavirus and dogs, is there much out there in the public domain at the moment? What's the situation?
This is a particularly sore point because in the past week or so, there's been a story that has come across from America about a dog dying from coronavirus.
Okay.
You see the link everywhere. When you actually click on the link and you give in to the clickbait, you actually find that the dog died of cancer. When I read this story, I thought to myself, well, I'd like to know exactly what coronavirus could do to our dogs. So I started looking for what you'd consider to be authorities on pet health. So the RSPCA, the American Kennel Club, the Humane Society. I couldn't find anyone willing to actually speak up on coronavirus until I got to the website of the UK Kennel Club.
Okay. So there is something out there.
There is, but you have to hunt it out.
All right. And what are the Kennel Club? And you said this is the UK Kennel Club, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And what is it that they're saying?
Now, their brightest vets say that coronavirus, dogs cannot catch it. They can only become contaminated by it. So in the sense, the virus doesn't impact their health, but they're testing positives because their fur might have come into contact with a surface that someone with coronavirus has touched.
Okay.
Or they may have breathed the air that someone with coronavirus has done. The most important thing to remember is that as of yet, dogs have not shown any signs of infection.
But I would imagine, because everyone listening to the podcast, the science and the medical advice around coronavirus and how we as a human population deal with it is changing all the time as scientists and medical experts become more aware of how the virus impacts the human body and the potential long-term effects of that. So would it be fair to assume that as time progresses, perhaps vets, canine organisations like you've mentioned the UK Kennel Club, advice will be more forthcoming simply as knowledge becomes greater?
You would imagine so. I'm someone who very much believes in data and research and science as it is. And when you believe in science, you must be prepared to change your belief or your position when new evidence is available. I'm sure eventually there'll be more information that will come out in time. I know prior to this dog in America, there were stories of 2 dogs in Hong Kong, and I'm sure there must be other examples that haven't filtered through to the English-speaking media. All we can do at the moment is try to protect and care for our pets the best way we can. And that means, no, they don't need a mask. Yes, you should still social distance when you're on a walk with your dog. Third and final, you should keep washing your hands, because remember, you might go to work, you might go out, you might go shopping, you might touch this, that and the other. What's the first thing you do when you come home before you wash your hands?
Well, I know certainly the first thing that happens in my house is whenever you come through the door, you're usually greeted by a flurry of fur.
And that's the one behaviour, more important than any, that we have to change in the short term. Please, when you come home, go and wash your hands, or if you've got hand sanitizer with you, put your hand sanitizer on before you say hello to your dogs, because we do know that traces of coronavirus has been found in dogs' fur.
So following on from the COVID fallout, another piece of news that caught our eye this week, the Dogs Trust, highlighting how the financial fallout from the pandemic could result in an increase in animals being euthanised or put up for rehoming. Now, the Trust referenced the global financial crash of 2008, when it saw a 25% rise in the number of abandoned dogs and, alarmingly, a 25% rise in the number of dogs being put to sleep. Now, Scott, these are obviously incredibly distressing and incredibly worrying figures, but how worried should we be?
In the UK, there are an estimated 10 million dogs. The Dogs Trust report suggests that 40,000 dogs could become homeless due to coronavirus. So considerably, that is a lot less than 1%. Obviously, we shouldn't dismiss this report. Everybody has been going through a troubling time with being furloughed, with financial insecurity, and even for the dogs themselves, it has been a very confusing time. But I'll come back to that momentarily. In the financial crash that they talk about, so the recession from about 12 years ago, there were more abandoned dogs, the euthanasia rates increased. The estimation is that if coronavirus follows the same pattern, there'll be an extra 1,800 dogs euthanised in the foreseeable future.
Which is obviously a figure no one wants to hear of.
Of course, it is. We're at a point in history where dog welfare is improving and improving and improving. We have more shelters, we have more fosters, we have a number of independent charities that work for the protection of specific breeds. At this point in history, we're better equipped to deal with what's to come than we ever have been. Throughout history, when societies have been facing difficulties, albeit disease, economic disaster, wars, catastrophe in general, obviously care for pets tends to become of a secondary importance.
Yeah, it tends to go by the wayside.
Realistically, that is what the Dogs Trust is trying to highlight. We should be aware that if we do go through another lockdown, if this furlough continues, if COVID continues into the next year, there might be problems ahead. However, from the actual report, it wasn't the elements about what could happen that troubled me.
Okay.
The thing that actually worries me the most is something that's happened already.
And that is?
In March of this year, searches on Google for buying puppies or where to get a puppy increased by 166%.
166%?
Yes.
That's a phenomenal increase.
Yes. When people were buying these puppies and taking them home, many people were furloughed. Some people are still furloughed now. And they acquired a COVID puppy, which was great. It gave them company. It gave them reason to exercise. It changes the environment of the house. There are a billion wonderful reasons to have a puppy. However, it gives way to problems now.
So are you saying essentially then that lockdown, contrary to what many people probably did and possibly thought, was actually an incredibly bad time to introduce a puppy to your household?
Absolutely, because if you imagine, for a dog, attention and affection is a form of currency. Your dog's doing his 40 hours of work every week by your side, getting strokes and getting cuddles and getting love.
'Tis indeed a tough life.
And then one day, it's only getting 16 hours wages.
Yeah.
How are you meant to explain that to a dog? How's a dog meant to understand, your corona's over, you're going back to work? Suddenly, this dog's having to be at home for 8 hours a day.
Okay, and that obviously has its knock-on impacts. I would imagine separation anxiety being one of them.
Separation anxiety is seeing a massive increase. I think, to be honest, it's going to be an explosion of unnatural proportions because the environment the dogs were brought into has been artificial. For a dog's perspective, it is understandably confusing. But this feeds into the first part of the report. That dog that's left at home now for 8 hours a day and out of boredom starts destroying the sofa. These dogs are going to face an increased chance of being taken to shelters now, and it's going to create a whole new generation across dog rescue centres of COVID puppies who are there for no fault of their own.
So I guess the old adage could be extended. A dog isn't just for Christmas, it's for life.
A dog's not just for COVID, it's for a lifetime.
It's that time of the Dogcast again, where we sneak into the science lab and see what wonderful discoveries await us here at Paw HQ. We're clothed in our pristine white lab coats and we've checked there's no escaping gas. Scott, what's under the microscope this time round?
The magnetic field.
I think we might need a bigger microscope.
Right, okay. I'm sure you're familiar with a magnetic compass.
Yes.
But it turns out that dogs have one as well. But to understand it, we need to first think about the Earth's magnetic field. Now, the magnetic field of the Earth is created by the rotation of the Earth and the Earth's core moving at different speeds. So it creates essentially the effect of a ginormous magnet.
So, the Earth's magnetic field, what does it do? And what would happen to the Earth? What would happen to us if it wasn't there?
Essentially, it works almost like a mirror. It tends to deflect away the solar wind, and the solar wind is pretty bad for the Earth, as it would destroy our ozone there. Now, if we didn't have one, obviously there'd be no ozone there, there'd be more radiation on Earth, there'd be more cancer and other unpleasant diseases.
And pretty much we would all be scuppered.
Yeah, pretty much. Now, the magnetic field isn't something that's a constant. It can change. The actual location of magnetic north can change up to 10 metres in a day. Yeah, so it's not something that's the same every day. Some days it will be more stable. The other days it will be more unstable. Why does this excite me? Why does this interest me? There's been a new study that focuses on how dogs use the magnetic field. And it's the first big one on this topic to come out for a number of years.
Please tell me that dogs secretly have a little doggy compass that they use.
Well, technically, there is a way to use a dog as a compass.
I love this.
Right, so to go back, we have to look at a study from 2013 by Heinrich Böder. I hope I pronounced the name right, I probably haven't. So she was from the Czech Republic, and she has studied magnetic fields for a long time and their impacts in animals.
Okay.
And she, with some colleagues, published a study. So what they did, her and her colleagues went around videoing and photoing dogs doing number ones and number twos.
Okay.
So in total, they followed 70 dogs, and the numbers is where it really gets quite illuminating. 28 males, 42 females from 37 different breeds. They examined 1,893 poops.
Everyone needs a hobby.
And 5,589 peas.
Again, everyone needs a hobby.
Now, initially, they didn't find anything remarkable until they started comparing each individual incident, shall we call them, against the position of the sun, the wind direction, time, and the magnetic field. And they found something extremely surprising.
Tell us more.
When dogs do a number two, and this is both male and female, they align themselves along the north-south axis. When they do a number two, they basically act as a compass to show you where north is.
This was in how many of the dogs again?
So, in the case of the north-south axis when doing the number two, it was in all of them, but only on days when the magnetic field was stable, which was only 30% of the days that they were doing. There's a lot of possible reasons for it. When males urinate, they tend to face northwest, and ladies tend to go north-south.
And any particular reason for that? Maybe the study didn't extend that far, did it?
It didn't. One of the suppositions would be that males tend to do their business on three legs, so it tends to impact the angle at which they're standing at.
Yes.
There are a few other components to consider. They did notice that in the mornings there were slight westward shifts, and in the afternoons, eastward shifts, so it would suggest that the position of the sun has some impact in it. Mm-hmm. But at this point, more research still needs to be done, and there are still more studies going on, and this brings me up to the next study, the next discovery. One of Mrs. Böder's students, again, excuse me with the pronunciation here, Katerina Benediktova, has recently published a study where she put cameras and GPSs on dogs when they were out for walks.
All right. Mm-hmm.
And what they discovered was when they were out that the dogs tended to explore the environment in one of two ways. Now, one way they would be attracted by a scent and they would go off following it. They called this tracking. Mm-hmm. And dogs that track the scent would always track their owner's scent or always sort of retrace their steps directly and come back straight away.
Now, these were dogs that were off-leash, or were they
Off-leash.
They were off-leash. Okay.
In this case, it was 27 dogs they eventually used, several hundred trips over a few years. The other type of exploration they did was what was called scouting. It was often unidentifiable what had attracted the dog's attention. The dog would go heading off into the woods, on average about 1 kilometre away from the owner. The dog would almost run in a badly formed sphere, but what they discovered was that when the dog was at its furthest point from its owner, it ran along the north-south axis, normally for about 20 metres before it returned.
So there was almost like a system in how the dog was moving. Was that the case?
Yeah, in some respects, they were aligning themselves like they had compasses for a moment before they headed back. The study talks about 223 examples of when dogs went scouting into the forest, and 170 times one of the dogs ran the north-south axis. And whenever they did this, they returned back to their owners faster than had they not. Now, we don't know what this function is, but that is a large enough sample size to say that dogs appear to be doing this north-south run deliberately.
Referring back to the first study and how the most recent results that you're talking about may have been affected by things like the magnetic field days when it was strongest. Any indication that the most recent study has been impacted by factors like that?
Not that I've read so far. I imagine there's going to be more information coming out because they do have a second phase planned within the study. What they're going to be doing now is putting magnets on the dog's collars. They're going to try this because an experiment was done like this on humans some years ago, and they discovered that having magnets actually interfered with a human being's navigational sense. The exciting part is this study has shown that dogs do have this navigational sense. The problem is, how do you prove that they are using the magnetic field? The only way to do it realistically is you need to be able to isolate every other sense.
We want this dogcast to be as interactive an experience as possible, so please get in touch. You can talk to the paw on Facebook, www.facebook.com/talk2thepaw pod, Twitter @talk2thepaw pod, email info@talk2thepaw.co.uk, and all the podcasts are available to listen and download on Apple Podcast, Spotify and Google Podcasts. Time to delve into the mailbag, and it's your chance to have those burning doggy questions answered by our resident canine nerd. Magda from the Netherlands has been in touch about her 4-year-old Cocker Spaniel. Now, Scott, I know Magda had a number of questions which you've answered personally, but there was one aspect that we thought merited particular focus on the dogcast, and it's related to canine aggression. Magda's noted that her dog has shown aggressive behaviour, including snapping towards other male dogs, and on some occasions she's concerned that he was the one triggering the confrontation. So what should she do?
How can you tell if your dog is starting the problems? Body language between dogs and humans under stress is very, very similar. What you do see with a dog under stress is a definite stiffening. A dog will tense up and almost freeze before a dog attacks.
Yeah, I think we can all recognise, having seen our own dogs behave like that to a greater or a lesser degree, or seen other dogs behave like that.
In a sense, if two dogs are playing or interacting and you get to the point where you see your dog freeze, that is the point where you need to intercept your dog or redirect your dog and get your dog away from it. So many things happen in the course of play that it's very, very difficult to isolate. The problem is, a lot of things that dogs do in play look like fighting, and a lot of things dogs do when they're fighting look like play.
How do you differentiate between play and perhaps when that play becomes something a little more serious?
It's generally tough. What you do tend to see when dogs start playing is first a little aspect of chase me, chase me. When they are chasing, you should see turn taking, so it shouldn't always be one dog chasing the other. Another aspect of it you're likely to see is vocalizations, so it will sound like they're growling. Now, eventually the chase will become more specific physical play, and it often involves one of the dogs self-handicapping.
And by that you mean?
Laying down letting the other dog towards its neck, exposing itself, putting itself in a weaker position.
All right. Now, I would have thought that one dog exposing its neck to another dog would leave the dog that's exposing the neck in a very vulnerable position, but maybe that's the point, is it?
It's almost like a demonstration of trust between dogs.
All right.
And because when dogs play, they practice something called bite inhibition, so they don't bite full on.
And is that something that they learn as pups?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they continue to do so. You will notice sometimes when dogs play, one dog might get too excited and bite too hard, and that will be the end of it.
But then obviously the other dog will signal that that's been
Too
unacceptable.
much.
Okay.
Yeah. You will also see regular breaks. Now, if, for example, you take your dog out and it's playing with another dog and is being chased for 15 minutes, that wouldn't be fun for you, so it's not fun for your dog. Another very simple thing you can do if you are trying to work out, is my dog playing, is it fighting, what's happening here? If you actually take hold of your dog or you put your dog on the lead for a few minutes, and if your dog actually tries to walk away or go behind your legs, it's telling you it's not enjoying it.
Okay, so time to remove yourself and the dog from the situation.
As I say, I would always stop them after too long to ensure they don't get overheated. Realistically, some basic rules of trying to understand, is my dog causing the problem? Is your dog turn taking? Is your dog respecting the breaks, like the pauses? Is your dog self-handicapping at all? Now, in general approaches, when dogs meet and they sniff each other, so we're talking the on-lead approaches, we have a different question entirely. In an ideal world, the dog should meet, have a little sniff, they might do a little circle and that'll be it. What you'll see when dogs do not enjoy that experience is this freezing once again. So they might circle each other, trying to decide, sort of playing a bit of Russian roulette, who's going to stop first and let the other dog sniff properly. If you see that your dog does stop, lets the other dog sniff, he's looking away, you might see his tongue sort of licking his lips. You may even, in really fearful cases, see the wild eye that we spoke about before, so an eye go half white.
Okay.
And the last point to make, really, is that dogs can smell other dogs from 3 kilometres or more away. They see their entire life through an olfactory perspective. That they live through their nose. It's us that live through our eyes. Okay. It's us that need to approach people to meet them. Okay. But when your dog smells another dog's urine, I know I'm back to urine or number 2s again, but when it smells the urine, it can tell the other dog's age, it can tell the dog's health, it can tell where the dog is in the ovulation cycle. It can even sometimes smell which dog goes with which owner. So there's a variety of information there that your dog gets just from smelling what the other dog has left behind.
So the dog, in essence, probably has an anticipation of any negative situation, any threat, long before it actually sees the other dog. Yeah,
and you'll find that every dog has a tolerance of other dogs from specific distances. So, you might have a nervous dog that can't tolerate being 5 foot from other dogs.
Yeah.
But there'll be a sweet spot. It might be 8 foot. Mm-hmm. Honestly, one of the things you could always do is that you don't watch the other dog for a while from a distance.
Yeah.
You don't have to rush and say that. I'd repeat, it is us that live through our eyes. It's us that have to go over and approach people.
Gadgets. Gizmos. Gastronomy.
Artificial intelligence is gradually spreading into more and more aspects of our lives, and it was only a matter of time before its application was used in the pet industry. There's a range of products on the market equipped with AI, which claim to help you analyse your dog's emotional well-being. But Scott, do we really need a gadget or an app to tell us how our dog is feeling?
I would like to say no, but I sit here with a watch strapped to my wrist that tells me exactly how many steps I've taken every day in case I happen to forget that I could walk.
And probably tells you what your heart rate is.
Oh yeah, it tells me my heart rate. It tells me exactly the number of kilometres I've walked, miles that I've walked. It can play music, it can send text messages. It can do all those things that I don't actually use.
Which is all absolutely fabulous. But do we need it?
Do we need it? Of course we don't. The problem is, now when you look at the dog market, fitness trackers started selling tremendous amounts to human beings. Then they saw this little gap in the market for people who would do anything to improve the lives of their pooches. The question is, do these kind of things work for dogs? Realistically, there's very little evidence suggesting they do. So going back to the original question, whether we really need a gadget or an app to tell us how our dog's feeling, I read one this week that was absolutely astonishing.
Bells and whistles?
Oh, not bells and whistles, church bells and steam train whistles.
Fabulous.
It was remarkable. This app claims that by using a library of dog bark samples from different breeds and different sizes, it's able to detect 5 emotions in your dog.
From different dog barks?
From different dog barks.
Can I just say something here? Apologies for interrupting, but I would have thought that dog bark, well, dogs only had a limited vocabulary. I wouldn't have thought that one needed a library of dog barks.
Oh no, apparently you do. Apparently the library consists of over 10,000 dog barks. My question about this, right? Okay, so the 5 emotions they can detect: happy, relaxed, anxious, angry, and sad.
There's not one for sleepy, there's not one for dopey, and there's not one for doc.
No, it's very much the 5 dwarves, isn't it? The first issue is, I do think dogs are a little bit more complex than this. I feel that they're underplaying a dog's emotional range. You put this collar on the dog, which also tracks the calories that your dog burns. But
Of course it does.
Into that.
Yes.
So your dog says, woof, woof, woof. And to be fair, the whole advertising feature didn't explain precisely how it tells you what the dog's feeling. But obviously it's either going to do something ridiculous like, I'm happy today. Woof, woof, woof. I'm anxious now.
Okay.
Now, some years ago, there was a book written by a behavioural psychologist called Dr. Stanley Coren. And he wrote a book called How to Speak Dog. I was very disappointed when I read it because I was hoping it was going to be a linguistic phrase book. He identified that dogs make 27 different sounds. Well, specifically, 27 sounds that have different emotional reasoning behind them.
All right, so 27 different vocalizations, yes?
Yes, that would be accurate to say. Not 5, 27.
All right.
So.
Can you tell us what those are?
Well, there's huff, 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 and there's huff, huff, and there's and a few others, quite probably.
Okay.
But, the important part to take away is obviously this market that once upon a time in the canine industry started out as activity trackers. So, just because you feel a little bit silly having an activity band on your wrist, you'd obviously feel better if your best friend has one on his collar too, to now trying to outdo each other and coming up with more and more ridiculous promises for the fulfillment that they can offer you as a dog owner.
Is this our way of us trying to humanise our dogs?
Absolutely. Do you know how I know when my dog's happy?
Well, probably because he wags his little tail, I would imagine, and looks happy.
It's little known, but dogs actually laugh.
Okay.
I don't know if you've ever come home and your dog's got a bit giddy to see you.
Yes.
And it might run around a little bit and you might hear this kind of breathing pattern, something like...
Yeah, there's just a very slight vocalisation there.
Yeah, and This is almost like the dog's laughing, and this is something the dog demonstrates when the dog is happy. You do see with certain types of dog that they actually smile as well.
Even Scotty dogs?
No.
Okay.
He just purses his lips in disapproval.
Of course he does.
Oh, you're home, I'm delighted.
All right, yeah.
I think he's half emo. And, for example, if my dog's feeling anxious, what he'll often do is he'll hop up on the sofa and he'll press his hip against mine.
Oh, the little hip press.
And you know what a hip press means?
He's anxious.
Aside
He just
from
told
he's
us.
anxious, yeah. It's not just that he's anxious, it is very much a hug from a dog. There are a myriad of behaviours. If your dog is sad or sometimes unwell, you'll see it hiding underneath a table or in a dark corner, not wanting to be exposed. Do you know the best way to learn how your dog demonstrates its emotions?
I would say get to know your dog.
Yeah. Put your telephone down, close your laptop, turn the TV off, and get outside with them.
Wagtastic Woofs gives us here at Paw HQ the opportunity to recognise those extra special dogs who've gone above and beyond to enrich our lives. And to mark the recent International Assistance Dog Week, we had to bring you the story about Marshall, who's been at the side of his hearing-impaired owner Joanna as she deals with the challenges her deafness presents. This wondrous Cocker Spaniel has been both a huge practical and emotional support to his owner as she battles a range of health conditions. Recently, Joanna's been shielding and Marshall has been there throughout, providing comfort, companionship and support to navigate an incredibly difficult period. So, to Marshall, our hearing dog hero, and indeed to all the other assistance dogs who perform such a valuable role for their owners and their families, a very big thank you. Remember, you can nominate your own Wagtastic Woof. Get in touch and tell us all about that very special dog who's made a difference to your life. Contact us on Facebook or Twitter, Talk2ThePaw Pod. Email info@talktothepaw.co.uk. Your stories and comments, questions and suggestions are all welcome. That's all for now. Thanks so much for your company. Until next time, goodbye.